Hi, I'm Mandi Swain, and we are here today for another episode of Origination Boost. And my guest today is Logan Mohtashami, right? Did I do it
Mohtashami,
right?
yes,
I,
yes.
I want it like with a lot of pizzazz, right? You deserve that.
Mohtashami, or people just call me the chart daddy, so that's kind of the easy way.
I love that so much. Well, I feel like we're old friends because we've gotten to know each other because you've been part of Premier Mortgage's success sales rally and come and shared your wisdom and knowledge about the market. And so now I'm grateful that you said yes to the Origination Boost podcast so people can hear your insight in the market, because that is always important to originators and real estate agents.
Yes, everyone needs one good nerdy friend. I always say that I'm as nerdy as they get, so I can be useful to people.
But you're nerdy fun. I mean, you might be ridiculously smart and fun. So there's that, you know.
Yes, if you can. Unfortunately, my economic friends, I love them all to death. They tend to be a little bit tad boring and stale. So I try, obviously I was at your event. So at events, I try to liven things up and try to talk about economics in a way that people can relate to.
Yeah, well, I know this isn't even on my questions for today, but how did you get into this field of, being the expert on economics? I mean, how did you find your way there?
This was all a tragic accident. There was no intentions to ever do this. Our family's been in banking since the late 1950s. My father still owns his mortgage broker company. I was an LO for 17 years before I retired early 2020. But in 2010, a guy named Jason Resnick from Benzinga Financial saw me talking on Facebook, said, "Hey, do you want to write for us?" And I was like, I don't want to write about political economics, but I'll write about real estate. That started this whole thing. And around 2014 and 2015, I saw so much bad information out there on the internet. I call it doom. Like, to get attention, people give a lot of bad information. So from that point on, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this in a very economic, analytical sense. It's going to be very nerdy. It's probably not going to get a lot of attention, but at least people have somewhere to go to talk about real economics and try to make it as fun as possible. And then Housing Wire hired me 2 weeks before 2020 happened, and then COVID happened. And then a lot of people remember me for, on April 7th, 2020, talking about, hey, we're about to have the greatest recovery, and not only in housing, but the US economy. And Housing Wire said, "You're crazy. We can't publish this. This is nuts." And I said, no, you're crazy, because those people that are hoarding toilet paper and wine are crazy. So, and then from then on, we did this newer tour. I've gone to your events. I've gone to a lot of events. I've been to 19 already this year. So my job is to basically, talk about economics in a fun way, in a relatable way. But none of this was planned. This was all just one thing led to another, and now we're here.
Well, I love that. And I do love that you're like, stop doom scrolling, like get the information from a source that you can trust, because the market, a lot of times, what you're hearing and what's actually accurate differ a lot of times.
Yes, we live in a society after 2008 in the advent of social media that, to be honest, to generate viewership, you have to be as crazy and bearish, and I call it doom possible, because you need engagement. And it's true. I can have my top 10 housing economic friends, and we could go on YouTube and we'll get probably 200 views. But if you say housing bubble crash, I'll get a couple 100,000 views. So about 11 years ago, I thought, okay, let's attack this group. Let's get them in forecasting and models and everything. And I've took them on live debates and stuff. So I took it a little bit different approach than my fellow economist friends, but I think this is more relatable to people. And plus, I think the real estate and mortgage industry like to have someone to fight for, to take kind of the headlines away. But if I do my job right, everyone kind of understands what's really going on, and those people look crazy. So that's the whole purpose of teaching economics in a way. And this goes back to my old high school basketball coach days. I was originally going to be a high school basketball coach and teach history, but the pay wasn't that great. So it's come full circle now, and now I'm the chart daddy. We do the nerd tour and we teach economics, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun for me.
Well, and I love it because a lot of times I'll hear loan officers, the market's this, the market's that. And I love that you're just real about it and you tell us the good and the bad and give it to us straight. And that's why I love following you on social and what you write for Housing Wire and having you speak at, conferences that I'm involved with, because you give it to us straight and it's real, and you don't sugarcoat it, but you also look at the silver lining in the market, and I really appreciate that part.
Yeah, economics done right should be boring, but my job is to tell you the truth and show it with data, right? The best antidote for fear is usually just data, but you have in this modern day age, attention spans are so light, but you've got to be able to connect to people in a way that they'll remember, and it's fun. Like, my Instagram page, first start off with a couple thousand people, but now we get 1 to 2 million people every 30 days there, and we do the nerd tour stuff, we do videos, and it's teaching, right? I'm a teacher, and if I do my job right, people could probably finish my sentences and go, hey, no, that's wrong, it's this, and again, that's the love for me, is watching people grow, just like the old high school basketball coach seeing kids grow and develop as a team. I think of the whole real estate and mortgage industry as my team that I'm trying to
Yeah,
coach and teach in that light.
I love that so much. Okay, so how would you summarize the key housing market trends loan officers should be tracking right now, or real estate agents, particularly inventory, purchase applications, mortgage yields, all that fun things?
You know, this year is the healthiest year we've had in many years. Last year we were getting into a healthier spot, but for the first time in many years, I always call it mortgage spreads, right? Not a lot of people knew what mortgage spreads were, but because mortgage spreads, which is the difference between the 10-year yield and 30-year mortgage rates, it's compressed down to a level that rates could stay lower for longer and less volatility. A great example is 2026. We have all these crazy headlines in the first like 6 weeks, and mortgage rates really haven't budged too much.
Right.
And In the past few years, mortgage rates will already be above 7%. And what that does is that kind of ruins the year, as you're dealing with higher rates, then you got to deal with lower rates. But for the first time, we're going into spring. There's a lot of rate cuts in the system now, right? Mortgage spreads are almost back to normal, which means it protects the volatility from happening. Inventory is up. We're not quite back to normal, but we're at a level to where home prices can't escalate out of control. And rates getting just near to 6%. If you take the holidays and snow weather out of it, demand can grow. And housing got a little bit better affordability wise because price growth has slowed down. Wages are up, and now rates went a little bit lower. We haven't had this backdrop in years, right? And this kind of looks like every kind of housing cycle I've seen over the past, but really it looks like the early 1980s when affordability was worse. People said nobody was going to buy a house ever again. Everyone's going to be a renter because rates were elevated. But affordability gets better over time if inventory is up and price cools down, and now rates are lower. So you couldn't ask for a better backdrop going into spring of 2026.
Yeah, and from my desk as an originator, I feel like in 30 years in this business, I feel like this year, to your point, is more of a traditional market. I'm seeing like people come out of winter and then they're wanting to like buy in the spring and get that done before summer comes, and it feels more traditional, because last year it was wild. Like you couldn't have planned your business plan around the market because it was very to your point, it was bumpy last year.
Yeah, going into 2025, rates were already above 7%. So people already say, well, can you get a spring housing market? But it's interesting because it's been so long that we had a normal year that people forget what it used to be like. And,
Yeah.
Inventory has a seasonal normal increase, the buyers versus sellers, the problem with the housing market during COVID is that for the first time in our history, we authentically had a housing shortage. Like our data lines, I always joke that, in March of 2022, we only had 240,000 single family homes available for sale in the entire country.
Wow.
So it's like the hungry hippo games. You have 500 hippos and only one ball. It's just not, you can't have a functioning market like that. Not the case anymore. Buyers and sellers are both back into it, right? Affordability got a little bit better on its own just by price growth cooling down and wages outpacing home price growth the last 2 years. And now rates are lower, and now the volatility is less. Because I remember, my days as an LO, and if rates just go up 25 to 50 basis points in a week, it messes up everyone's kind of business and rate locks and everything. But now, calm and quiet, and doing normal stuff, and sellers don't have to worry about putting their house on the market and rates spiking or not enough inventory. This is what a normal housing market looks like, and it's not the most sexiest thing to talk about if you're trying to gain attention, but my job is to show the data and the charts so everyone can see, yeah, this it's been a while, but here it is, and it's much better than what we've had to deal with in the past few years.
Well, and this probably is not on my list, but I get this question a ton, and I'm sure you do too. Is the market going to crash? Are we going to see a correction? I get that all this time. And to me, I'm like, well, the cost of wood has not changed on building new houses. So maybe you can address that. It's definitely off script, but I get that question a lot from people.
So
I'm like, sitting on the sidelines is not a good plan right now.
I've got that question for many years, and I think what's happened is because after 2008, that was such a fond memory for everyone. Well, not fond, but I mean, it was something that's embedded in their minds that they think that was normal. So how I present it is that I'll take the home price index from 1942 to 2026, and then I always ask everyone in the crowd, how many years did home prices fall 1% if I take 2007 and 11 out of the equation? And people will give some guesses, but I go 0. How many recessions have we had post World War II? Double-digit unemployment, 18% mortgage rates, everything. The only time in history that we had nominal home prices fall on a national basis on a correction was 2007 to 11. And then I bring all the chart daddy charts where I show what was happening back then to what is happening now. So when people visually get to see the charts, they go, wow, it's so different. Well, just to give everyone some numbers, in 2007, active inventory was 4 million. Today, it's 1.22 million. In 2007 and 8, 9, 10, 11, monthly supply was 8, 9, 10 months. Now we're still under 4 months. In 2010, over 23% of the homes were underwater, right? It's really less than 1% right now if you take the aggregate total data. 40% of homes don't even have a mortgage. The FICO score data after 2010, after qualified mortgage, is the best in the history of the world, right? The nested equity for those who do have mortgages, and this is the chart that really, like, everyone wakes up and think, wow, people are talking about a foreclosure crisis. We've only had one foreclosure crisis in 80 years. But the loan to value, if I take all the houses in America together, the loan to value is 44.3% right now. Okay. And a lot of that is, people were putting a higher down payment percentage over the years, and now home prices have gone up. So there's so much nested equity, and the cash flow of households or that are homeowners, FICO scores are average of 740 and above for like 15 years now. So much different compared to then, where the housing credit market was actually breaking in 2005, 6, 7, and 8. Foreclosures and bankruptcy were all rising. Then the job loss recession happened. And then I call it my tombstone chart. When I die, Sarah Wheeler, my podcast partner, she's gonna put the chart daddy on my grave, and then she's gonna put the foreclosure chart. And I always go, I've been fighting a guy named Uncle Dave. I swear every family in America has an Uncle Dave, the guy that comes in and says, home prices are going to crash, you're crazy. But then I say, this is what was happening back then, and this is what's happening right now. So home sales were crashing in 2005 to 2008. Well, inventory went vertical. There was a lot of distressed sales. Our new listings data, homes that were coming onto the market, were running at 250 to 400,000 per week for years. Now, not the case. So you could not have two more different cycles in the history of America than what happened in 2008 to what's happening right now. And we can prove it because it's been 3 years now since home sales crashed. This market looks a lot like the early 1980s. In the early 1980s, home sales crashed. Mortgage rates were at 18%. We had 2 recessions back then. Home prices didn't fall nationally. They slowed down a lot, and we had much more inventory and much worse credit data. So it's really rare in America history to have even nominal home prices fall. But on a national basis, it was like a once in a lifetime event. And a lot of people are just thinking that. And always kind of remember, home sellers, they're kind of greedy. They don't just say, okay, listen, I'm going to take 20% off, or, as a total, and just sell homes off. So my job is to kind of show it in this long historical format, and then to give people the live data. And then once they visually see the charts, they're like, oh my God, that is different, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, and 30 years I've watched people and families, a lot of wealth has been built in real estate. It's just quite a blessing. And to your point, even if you had a 1% increase on a $400,000 home, that's $4,000 in equity gain that they maybe wouldn't have had in any other investment they have. So I think that's so wise to just say, okay, this is a snapshot in time. It became the core memory of a lot of adults that we have today. And so that's why they think it's going to happen again, probably.
Yeah. And it's 2026. Foreclosure data is not even back to pre-COVID level. Again, we've had many, many recessions post World War II, but only one foreclosure crisis. And that was a credit boom, credit bust. So much nested equity out there. It really is such a stark difference that I would say that those two cycles are like historically so different that you could, not only in America, but you could take world economics going back 300 years and just think, wow. And again, 2026, our price cut percentage is down year over year. Inventory growth has already slowed a lot from last year because rates are lower. So my job is just to teach this, because anybody could say crash or it's not going to crash. But my job is to kind of be the nerd
Give you
and show
context
model.
to why.
Yeah,
right?
just to
Give
context. And you got to show the charts. And I'm telling you, when people look at the charts, they go, oh, that doesn't look like, yeah. So we always talk about connect the dots, be the detective, not the troll.
Yes, I love that. So one question that I have is that I find it fascinating: 44% loan to value in this country, so much equity in homes, right? But we have seen the highest level of credit card debt.
Credit card debt always rises in every economic expansion in history, and adjusting to population and household, it's really not that big. So I always say, people always tell me there's 1.25 trillion credit card debt. I go, okay, I got 200 trillion of financial assets. So my army's bigger than yours. And what's happened is, if you don't have credit card expansion, you usually are not in a growing economy. Good point. Yeah, that number gets always taken out of context. What you do see is there's a lot of stress in the lower income side, the renter financial profiles, where credit card delinquencies and auto loan delinquencies and those things are rising in those areas. But on the homeowner-based side, it's very stable. So for 12 years, people have always showed me the credit card chart, and it's always rising in expansion. And I go, that's cute, but the household debt payments as a percentage of disposable incomes are still near all-time lows. Why is that the case? Because 70% of consumer debt is mortgages. And I always say, what's the best hedge against inflation? It's not Bitcoin. It was always this 30-year fixed mortgage. Why? You have a fixed debt payment, your wages rise, your cash flow gets better because of that. So it gives you more disposable income. That's the cheat code that we have in America. I always give my counterparts in other countries hate us because they don't have a 30-year fixed mortgage. Like in Canada, they're doing 90-year loan modifications because they're tied to short-term debt. So we don't have those issues here, but the homeowners on paper are fine. And again, I've heard the credit card debt thing for 11, 12 years. If it wasn't for COVID, we'd still have the longest economic and job expansion in history. Economic cycles work in a certain way. That's like not been on my radar for 10 or 11 years, because that's just a normal function of every economy expanding in the US where credit grows. If credit card debt was declining, right, that would be, a more problematic on the GDP or people consuming goods and services. But on a big time basis, it's a very small percentage of the overall debt. But compared to the $200 trillion of financial assets and the FICO scores and the cash flows of America, we're good on that. And that's going to be used every single year for the next 50 years. Trust me, people are going to use the credit card data. It has never worked out there. There's other things that can highlight credit stress for housing. That's not one of them, nor do we see it in our housing data of sellers stressed out there.
Interesting, because in my mind as a loan officer, I'm thinking, okay, well, these people have all this debt, right? They have equity in their homes. So a refinance may make sense, and they may get out of rate jail, like their 2.5%, 3% interest rates, and opt to take a higher interest rate, But what you're saying is this is normal procedure, you know, in our country.
The stress in the credit card debt is actually from the lowest households and lowest credit balances,
To make
right?
ends meet.
Yeah. So you know, it's how I explain student loan debt. In the last decade, student loan debt, nobody was going to buy a house because everybody has student loan. It's a student loan debt crisis. And I go, guys, has anybody ever bothered to look at the data? And they go, what are you talking about? And I say, majority of student loan delinquencies are college dropouts. And the majority of the balances are actually under 10,000. So when they came up with that 10,000 rule that Biden had to wipe off credit, 10,000 wipes out most of the credit card debt or student loan debt holders in America, because majority of the stress that we see in the data are actually college dropouts, people that go for a year or two and they don't finish college. That's where the stress is. But you get these people where they go, oh my God, they have 300,000 in student loan debt. They're paying 600,000 interest. But that's like less than like 2% of the entire student loan debt profile. So people that go to school and finish college and get jobs, they typically are the highest income brackets, not only in America, but on planet Earth in the history of human civilization, right? They tend to have more financial assets and everything. I was like, don't worry about the people that go to kind of college. But we do see stress, like in the credit card data, lower income households, renter financial profiles, those that didn't finish college out there. So the cash out loans on paper, you could always make sense. Well, okay, blend the rate in and your total payments go lower because, you know, your credit card debt's at 25, 30% interest. But you don't see the big volume because homeowner households are doing fine financially out there. And even, you know, the growth that you've seen in home equity line is still very little compared to the nested equity out there, because homeowners are doing well. And this goes back to even the last decade where a lot of people are like, why aren't people cashing out on a home sector? They don't really need to. They're doing fine. So again, my job is to show the data to make this all make sense. And when you visually see the chart daddy charts, it's like, there you go. Okay, I understand it better.
Well, good. So if somebody's part of their plan was to do cash out refinances, you might want to pivot, sounds like, based on that. Because
Yes,
the data does not support it.
Yeah, there's not that as much a supply as people think because of the 1.25 trillion of credit card debt growth.
Which leading indicators like pending home sales, jobless claims, did you find most predictive for the next 3 to 6 months?
So we have something called a weekend tracker. Every single weekend, I give all the housing economic data line that looks current and out a few months. We're always going to be 2 or 3 months ahead of the NAR and 3 to 6 months of the Case-Shiller Index. So kind of what I show everyone, and we could always do it for any city, zip code, or state in America, but a few things. Number one, our new listings data. These are the homes that come onto the market that don't have a contract. Usually the seasonal peaks of that is like 80 to 100,000, and during the housing crash years that was running at 250 to 400,000. If there's any kind of stress in the housing market, the new listings data goes vertical. It looks perfectly normal this year. Our active inventory are homes that are on the market that do not have a contract. This is different than the NAR and Redfin and all these people. Inventory growth went from 33% last year. Now it's like 9.8%. So we get to see the single family growth out there. That looks fine to us. 1/3 of all homes in America have price cuts year round. The price cut percentage is actually negative by more than 1% this year because demand has picked up. So that's on the inventory side. But we always look at the demand side as well. We have a weekly pending contract. These are the homes that go into the market and contract, and 30 to 60 days later, they go into the final sales level. We see that. We see the purchase application data that goes from the MBA. We put that into there where we see, is there year-over-year growth and week-to-week growth? So far this year, every single week, even with the snowstorms, we've had positive year-over-year data out there. And then we always keep an eye on rates, right? The housing market really revolves, I always call it, it's like the slow dance. There's a 10-year yield and 30-year mortgage rates, and they've been a slow dance partner since 1971, but we like them slow dancing very intimately, like close 1970s Soul Train slow dancing. So rates have come lower, mortgage spreads have come lower. That means you get lower rates, less volatility. When we get near 6% since late 2022, the housing data always improves on multiple fronts. So those are the things that we provide every single weekend to give everyone a heads up, because it's going to take like 2 to 3 months for the data to catch up to ours. And it's an unfair advantage. We always say it's like the cheat code we have out there, because we see people using old stale data, and they tend to make things either on the positive or negative side that doesn't make sense. So those are the things that we track, that we teach everyone. And again, we could always do it for any state, city, zip code, and anything, but I give you the general sense so everyone could understand what the national housing market is doing, so nobody has to worry about home prices crashing 30 or 40% like some of these YouTube people do.
Well, yes, I love it. It all sounds good to me. In a normal market, for the first time in 5 years would be awesome too. How should loan officers interpret job data, labor market shifts when advising clients on rate timing or purchase strategies? What's your advice?
So, the thing is, as an LO for 17 years, I never floated anything, because I always tell people, like, you only have so many business days in a purchase contract to get something done. Do you really want to stress out? However, with that said, a weaker labor market, oddly enough, is better for loan officers and real estate agents. And I always show this chart where I go, if you look at every single recession, home sales tend to bottom and then they rise for years after a recession. Why? Because rates tend to be elevated before the recession, and then all of a sudden sales aren't going anywhere, and then pricing gets a little bit cooler, affordability gets better, then rates go lower. And then if the labor data gets weaker, then all of a sudden everybody gets to do more business. And I always say that jobless claims, every Thursday, jobless claims data comes out. And those are the people that are filing for unemployment benefits. If that starts to spike above 300,000, you could have another leg lower in rates and be much lower than anything we've dealt with in the last few years. And that's the function of every housing cycle we've seen kind of post-World War II. So the labor data being softer helped rates go lower last year, in a year where inflation went up and we had all this treasury supply and nobody thought rates could go ever. So I call it paper, rock, scissors, labor over inflation, rocks win. And that's what's kept rates near 6%. And now we have a lot of rate cuts in the system. The spreads are better. So it's a much better environment for everyone. But when the jobs data gets weaker, bond market always gets ahead of the Fed. The Fed always meets every 6 weeks, kind of. So they're kind of the old and slow. So they'll play catch up. But the 10-year yield really guides everything. So it's really key to know the labor data and what's going on. And that's part of what we do every weekend and every day here at Housing Wire.
Yeah, and what we have seen is when the Feds reduce those rates, you're right. We've seen the benefit of the market and the rates ahead of those Fed decisions. And so it's been like this, like clients are like, "Oh my gosh, rates dropped." And I'm like, "Yeah, you missed the opportunity."
The bond market never sleeps. It always goes ahead of the Fed because it's a live variable. The Fed always going to be behind the curve because they meet every 6 weeks, right? So the 10-year yield is like my bread and butter, my oxygen, my food, what I sleep with, what I wake up with. So that really moves on live economic data. Today, this morning, the 10-year yield is down a few basis points because stocks are selling off. We have a lot of crazy headlines. So it doesn't wait for the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is always going to be behind what the 10-year yield does. And the 10-year yield can move up and down like crazy within a year, just depending on what happens. But now, not a lot of volatility. Rates are very stable. Spreads are good. Near 6%, sub 6% mortgage rates you have with ARM products now. So it's so much better now in this year, going out not only for this year, but going out for many years to come than what we've had to deal with in the last 3.
Well, and we're going to have a changing at the Federal Reserve. I mean, that's obviously off script completely, but just a question I have is, we're going to see a changing of the guard there. How do you see that? What do you think?
So Kevin Warsh, he wouldn't be my choice, because he tends to be very hawkish. He can't unilaterally cut rates more than what the committee wants, but he's going to be much more dovish than Powell. Like, you don't have to worry about him like coming out after the Fed presser and saying something really hawkish or anything. So it's a plus out there. So it's clearly going to be, at least while Trump is in the White House, he'll clearly have an agenda to try to keep rates lower, or make them go lower than what the market wants. Again, he's one guy, and there's a committee.
Still works on a committee.
So he can't unilaterally do it, but it is a positive because unlike Powell and some of the other people where they were very hesitant to kind of get mortgage rates lower or talk about that, he's going to be a little bit more dovish. So that's a positive, but there's limits to what he really can do for the Fed funds rate and mortgage rates.
Good. Well, looking ahead, what are the key scenarios you see for the housing market in the next year? Best case, most likely case, downside?
So to me, oddly enough, the downside would be if inventory wasn't growing as fast and prices rose faster than what I anticipate. Because every year that goes by where price growth is very little and wages rise, affordability gets better, and that's how affordability has gotten better over time when you're dealing with an affordability crisis. Because it's nominal home prices crashing is a very rare event. So you have to get it on the other side. To me, it's like if rates stay 6.25 and under, you get 237,000 more existing home sales. But because inventory is higher, price growth still stays very cool. Buyers and sellers get more comfortable with the housing market. And once they're comfortable, that seller, 70 to 80% of home sellers are buyers. When that seller puts that house on the market and he's got a mortgage buyer coming in, he sells his house, then he goes, buys another one, and transaction volume has more upside if you get mortgage demand coming back. And we've been near 4 million existing home sales for some time. The home builders are at 2019 levels still because they have sub 6% mortgage rates, but near 5 million total home sales. Just for context for everyone, the peak in the last decade was near 6 million. So you're missing about 1 million mortgage buyers really from the peak levels of the last decade. And they're still there. We have over 162 million people working. We have 5 generations of home buyers. Baby boomers, Gen Z, millennials, silent generation, and the greatest generation of all time, Gen X, right? We're still here as a second percentage of home buyers out there. So it's just a healthier backdrop as long as prices don't escalate out of control, which they shouldn't. Rates stay lower. And once people start to get more comfortable, right? I know a lot of people say there's a mortgage rate lockdown and we have more people with 6% plus mortgage rates than 3% and under. People that had 3 to 4% mortgage rates were 40% of the market, they're down to 3%. Why? Because baby boomers and elder millennials and Gen Xers, they sell their house and they go buy another one, and life finds a way out there. As long as it's affordable for their payments, they do it. So the mortgage rate lockdown, I wasn't a big fan of because home sales would be much more lower if that was the case. So the market is healing. It's getting better in itself. And now less volatility, more inventory, rates near 6%. It's as the most positive I've been in many years just because of that.
Love that. I love it. And I love that you bring up that people are, those 3 generations specifically are going to forsake the 3% because they want to do something different. They want to move. There's a reason that they're buying and selling, right?
Yes. And especially with elder millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers, every single quarter since 2022, we get to see the coupon data. They were selling their low mortgage rates to buy. And, since 70 to 80% of home sellers are buyers, that's how you have near 5 million total home sales. Now, imagine if rates go lower, affordability gets better, you get more first-time home buyers into the mix. That seller could sell and buy. That's how transaction volumes work. So, again, the easy answer would be rates going lower again, but that's just not how the Federal Reserve operates or how this economy operates. But considering everything we've had to deal with in the last 3 years, this is as healthy as you can get. And again, every year that goes by where wages rise and price growth cools down, affordability gets better, rates could stay lower, then you've got years and years of sales growth, and that's what housing cycles have looked like since the late 1960s.
So potential surge in pent-up demand if rates go lower, what signs should loan officers look for when trying to capitalize on that, right?
So this is an interesting aspect. Because home sales, I always say that existing home sales are at all-time lows when I adjust it to the workforce and the civilian labor force out there. So we're missing about 1.3 million home buyers in 2023, 2024, and 2025. So you're near 4 million, and they didn't go anywhere. They're still out there living their lives and out there.
They're either renting or living in mom's basement.
But also they're staying in their homes, right? Yeah. So that's sellers. So housing is unique in the sense supply is a function of demand, because that person that lists his home usually buys another one. So usually what happens is rates make another leg lower that wasn't part of the previous few years. For example, if mortgage rates were like 4.75 to 5.75, that would be that case. history has always shown us that when that occurs, or when the labor market gets weaker, actually a recession helps loan officers, real estate agents, because rates go down. Why? Because majority of the people are always working. And if the labor data gets weaker or breaks, everyone's going to do more business. The 1980s was a great example. After that second recession, people thought home sales were going to crash. Home sales went vertically higher, even though affordability was worse, just because we had so many people just waiting for affordability to get better to buy the house. And that usually is the case after recession. So if loan officers see this and they go, well, my clients say, who's going to buy all the homes and when in a recession? Just remember during COVID, when I wrote my COVID-19 recovery model, a lot of my economic friends are like, Logan, who are going to buy all these homes? There are 20 to 30 million people unemployed. I go, yeah, that's cute. And there's 5 million in forbearance. So the 35 million people off the grid, nobody's going to buy a house. I said, what you're forgetting, my army is bigger than yours. I have 133 million people still working with 3% mortgage rates. As soon as they stop hoarding toilet paper, we're going to have the sharpest recovery in housing ever, because we're working from a very low base. And that's what occurred with housing data. It had a V-shaped recovery.
So given ongoing affordability challenge, what practical strategies should loan officers emphasize with buyers who are rate or price sensitive?
So total payment. You want to get off the rate discussion. You want to get into the total payment discussion. When you get into the rate discussion, then you have tons of different variables that people are looking at on a daily basis. You focus on what that total cost is. You make sure the client knows what that comfort payment is. You keep them advised to where that comfort payment is on that day, because remember, it's not just a rate. Purchase price, taxes, insurance, loan balances, all these things get into that. And you tell them, hey, listen, if the rates come lower, your total payment does become lower, but you have to realize that this is the marketplace we're in. So if you need to find a comfort level, focus that comfort payment level so they get to see all the things that go into a housing cost. Because the rate side just can go up and down a little bit, but once they feel comfortable with that total payment, you keep reinforcing that. And then if they're serious home buyers, they pull the trigger, right? Because it's not like somebody says, I'm going to wait until mortgage rates get to 5.25. Okay, so I always tell LOs, you tell them this, every day that goes by, you get closer to death, right? So, the millions of people buy homes every single year. We have near 5 million total home sales in 2023, 2024, 2025. So that total payment level gets them off of the rate variable. And just like, okay, my wages grow up every year. Now that total payment looks a little bit better to me. And then all of a sudden they pull the trigger. Serious home buyers act that way. People that say it's a rate thing, I question if they're really serious home buyers. So always kind of get them and keep them posted on, okay, your total payment is here, your total payment is there, because they can't sit here for like 17 years and go, okay, I'm ready now. Oh, wait, my kid's already my kid's in college, and all this stuff. So serious home buyers, when they're ready and they feel comfortable with that total payment, they tend to pull the trigger, and you just focus on that. That's how I used to do it. Here's your total payment, and go, okay, your total payment is this, and then they're legit home buyers. They'll go in and do it. Non-legit home buyers, they're just going to wait for something, and then when the rates fall down, they go, maybe I need a little bit more. So they're not like serious people. You give them the total payment, you emphasize that. Their wages rise every year, so that payment becomes, hey, it's a little bit more easy. You go with that out there and focus on that rather than just the rate variable.
Yeah, I like that comfort payment and looking at future earnings going up and payments staying the same, and that the affordability of your home gets even more affordable over time.
That has been the golden egg of the U.S. economy for decades. The 30-year fixed product wasn't so much about prices, is about your debt payment stays the same. Of course, taxes and insurance and everything else arise, but because your debt payment stays the same, your wages go up, you get more disposable income. In an inflationary period of time, your wages go up a little bit faster. And because of that, your housing cost is less to those homeowners, right? This is why I always say, like, homeowners in America, like people who own homes, they're doing really good. Nobody knows that their total cost is because what you make at age 45 is usually more than what you made at 26, right? So as soon as you get into that house, that fixed payment starts. and then your life starts. And this is why even the last few years, we have near 5 million total home sales, because homeowners are different in a sense. They want to own something and start their lives, right? Or they need to sell and buy something bigger or smaller to keep their goings. It's never almost about a buy or rent things. It's the lifestyle of owning something, and typically is the middle and upper middle class, I know, that buy the homes. But once you get in, that clock of getting the benefits of that fixed debt payment, and this has nothing to do with refinancing at a lower rate or anything like that. It's just that the wages rising, that's the hedge against inflation. Like inflation ever really took off, that home is your protection against this. And this is why the economy is still expanding, why homeowners, are still consuming goods and services. And I always say that maybe Cleopatra, adjusting to inflation in her prime, had more wealth than America. But America has over $200 trillion of financial asset, and most of those are held by homeowners, right? So, and over time, that disposable income gets better, and your life could be better because you have more money to spend on other things.
Yeah, the hardest mortgage payments you're going to make is when you first buy your house, is what I'm hearing you say. And over time, that mortgage payment becomes less in your budgeting over time. And so if you've been waiting, the hardest payment you're going to make is when you first get your home, because over time, that payment will become more easy to be managed because of your increasing income. So yeah, I love that. And just comfort payment, what's comfortable today will become even more comfortable in your future.
Yes. And that was the whole design of the 30-year fix. A lot of people say, well, if you get a 30-year fix, I mean, not a lot of people stay in their house for 30 years, but if you get a 30-year fix, that was the design, not only to build equity by playing down principal, but it's that fixed payment. That's the hedge against inflation. Other countries wish they had it. They just don't have the banking system that we do to provide.
Yeah, we're very, very blessed to be in America and have such a great system for mortgage banking.
Oh, yeah, because absolutely.
Nowhere else has it. Nowhere.
No, my counterparts hate. I mean, they hate us for a lot of reasons, but that is just like, your fixed mortgage. I say, yeah, you guys got your 90-year loan modifications. Yeah, good luck with that one.
I think Australia was like a 7-year deal or something like that. So yeah, it's interesting to hear how other countries do it and how blessed we are in America to have this function of being able to have home ownership, have a 30-year fix, have something that you can choose not to have variable, or maybe you want to get an ARM because you have a plan long term. But I do think that the banking system in America, loan officers and agents and everyone, is very blessed to have a structured system like we do.
Yes, it's interesting. All those countries, they were borrowing at lower rates because they're tied to short-term rates, and they used to say, "Oh yeah, look, we have lower rates than you guys," and their home prices are actually much hotter in like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and all those than America, like by a lot. So we're actually very cheap compared to the world home prices. But I remember telling all of them, one day you're all going to pay the piper. One day, short-term rates are going to go up, and then all these, because you have to, these things need to be refinanced or redone. The payment jump would be extreme just on that, and you see the other countries having to deal with that. Here, peace of mind. You go to bed with that 30-year fix. You wake up in the morning with it, and that fixed payment, that debt cost stays the same. Other things can rise, and of course, there's always upkeep with the house, but that debt cost stays the same. Homeowners, I would say the last group on planet Earth you have to worry about are American homeowners. They're pretty much doing good.
I love that. Well, the thing is you bring so much wisdom. Let's close out with this. So looking at the next 3 to 5 years, so loan officers and agents are like, okay, what's the future look like? How do I plan for my, 1-year plan, 3-5-year plan? What do you see in housing demand in the next 3 to 5 years?
So we've had this lull in sales. History always says the next few years are going to be the growth phase, and that looks pretty normal. And again, I always like to use the 1980s because affordability was worse there. This doesn't mean rates are going to go super low like they did during the last decade or anything, but you get into the growth phase because affordability got better, wages rise, households rise. Household formation. Millennials and Gen Z combined are bigger than the total population of Japan. It's like over 140 million, right? So you have young replacement workers, and then you have Gen X, baby boomers, and the silent generation. You still have all these buyers into play. But because home sales are so low, you can have just growth by just returning to the mean average out there. So the next few years, the backdrop is healthier than what we had during COVID, where home prices escalated out of control, and then mortgage rates went from 3 to 7%, and inventory was really low. That was how I deem it. Very unhealthy, very unhealthy. Then the savagely unhealthy housing market, where you have too many people fighting over too few homes. The hungry hippo here. Now, growth, normal, right? The worst, last year the theme was the worst in housing is over, but now you get into the growth phase out there, and every year affordability gets better by prices and incomes and everything, and if rates stay lower and all that, and if there is a recession, hopefully that never happens, everyone does more business. And that's the history of housing economics, right? Because we've been so depressed with sales that I'm missing about 3.9 to 4 million normal, just on average. That equates to the whole yearly existing home sales report. So that's the pent-up demand theory that we've seen in other cycles. Here, it's just much bigger now, and we have a much bigger population out there. And we have 5-generation home buyers, cash buyers, investors. You put it all together, that's how you get back to kind of a normal trend over time. But you got to start thinking about the growth phase rather than fearing about any more major declines in sales or anything like that. The worst in housing is over, and time to get ready into growth mode again.
Yeah, somebody turns 18 every day is what I hear you saying, and I hear you saying that there's houses that are going to need to be replaced and rebuilt, and we are going to be in a normal market for the first time. And so if you've been in the business 6-7 years, you haven't really experienced this. So this is better. Normal and consistent is better.
Boring is a good thing, and sometimes, right? And during COVID, I was just like, oh man, and but now it took a few years, and I haven't been able to say this in 4 years. But the housing market is healthy, normal. It's boring. It's going to be painful for these doomers that live off 40-50% national declines, but here we are again, and the year is already starting out that way. Anybody who reads our work could kind of say, hey, listen, this looks pretty normal, and it's a good thing.
Well, my advice is from the loan officer's desk is do the work, show up every day, work really hard. And the good part is because we see a more normal traditional market, your work matters today more than ever, because you can build more consistency in your business, your brand, your market, helping more people in your communities. And if you don't follow Logan on social media, you should. He's a ton of fun, and he's a geeky, nerdy, what did you say, self-professed nerdy economist that's a fun guy. So if you don't want boring economics, which I don't, follow Logan on social. He's a ton of fun, and he's a good friend to my crew here at Premier Mortgage Resources. And thank you for joining Origination Boost and sharing your wisdom. It is valuable to so many, and I'm grateful for you.
Pleasure. And as a former LO, I get it. I get what everyone's going through, right? And my father's still a mortgage broker, and he sends me texts, what is this? What is this? What is this? So I understand, and I try to relate it in a way that loan officers get it, because I was one of you guys for 17 years. So I get what's going on out there.